is Porn Talk Live. Here is your host, Eric Zuzak.
Take control of your life. Break the chains and rise. No more feeling powerless. No more shame. Take your power. Break out of the pain. Because it's more than fornication. More than procreation. It's not just self-stimulation. Sex energy is for creation and transformation into a new destination. Porn Talk, yeah. Change your heart from dark to light. Porn Talk, yeah. Break free, take back your power and rise. I said take back your power.
This is Porn Talk. This is Porn Talk Live. Here is your host, Eric Zuzak.
Welcome to Porn Talk. This is Powerful Eric. This show is not just about breaking addictions. It's about breaking belief systems. We are bound by self-imposed and societal chains. Break those rusty, nasty, heavy old chains and get empowered right now. Today, we have an awesome chain breaker. His name is Sean Murphy. He let me start that again. His name is Sean Murphy, and he's someone who teaches what they live, and that makes the next 30 minutes so special. When asked, what would you say about Sean, his clients say he's joy and leadership combined. Here's some evidence of his success. 5-time #1 best-selling author, international speaker and consultant. He's been paid to stand on stages in over 30 countries, and his message has been translated in over 40 languages. Today, we will hear some great stories, powerful lessons, and we'll have some fun too. He is a licensed brain trainer, Nero-Encoding Specialist. Help me welcome Sean Murphy. Welcome, Sean.
Eric, I'm so excited to be here. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the dedication you've had. For Brene Brown says that your vulnerability gives others courage. And I can only imagine how many people applaud you on a daily basis who get to listen or download this podcast to give them the courage to break some of their own heavy, rusty chains.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But let's hear your story. Licensed brain trainer, Nero-Encoding Specialist, changing the hardware rather than the software. Tell us about you.
So real quick, when I was 14, I had an emotional experience that made me say these words: I'll never have another bad day. Now, it didn't all happen all at once, yet from that moment, I decided to pay attention to the environment I was in. I had already been programmed right from childhood. When we get programmed, mom was a little bit of a drinker, and so that makes you kind of codependent. We didn't have all of these labels when we were growing up. They just said you're challenged, you're sticky, you're clingy, and you have all of these languages. So I learned, and then my dad put me into sales from a very early age. My first sales call, I was 16 years old in a coal mine, and I got rejected. And my dad pushed me through the rejection from 8 a.m. to 1 in the morning when I finally wasn't rejected. And that's a whole nother story. So I had to realize it was me that was doing the rejection. It was me that was saying no to myself. It was me not believing in myself. So go on to vice president of sales of a $200 million company where you're in charge of a sales force, and you realize how addicted everybody is to this thing called approval. And so what I figured out is I need to learn on the brain. Everybody has different stories, yet 98% of the population feels rejected. 2% have, 2 or 3% have all the wealth, and some of them aren't really that happy. But the other 98% write sticky notes and they don't work, and they go to seminars and they don't work. And we call these things called books called shelf help instead of self-help. So I worked in this idea saying there's something wrong with the hardware, because all of the programming, all of the software, all of the events and books and tapes and trainings, they don't seem to be producing the result everybody wants, because things are not better than they should be. So that's why I went into brain training, neuroencoding, mental toughness, self-talk, hypnotherapy, and a few other things that allow me to help rewire the hardware and upgrade the hardware in someone's brain.
Wow. I remember the day you talk about taking all the seminars and online courses and books. And one day back when I was deep in my addiction, I had a mammoth library of self-improvement stuff. And I took most all of it and I dumped it in a church's dumpster. Never forget the day. But later on, I went to learn that it wasn't the self-development. It was other things like my brain. And so how can one change the hardware? I understand changing the software of the brain, what we put in and things like that. But how does one change your brain? But, I'm getting ahead of myself. You said you had worked at 16 years old in sales for a coal mine?
Well, we were professional. We were a professional sales family, right? You hear about families who are joining the circus. Our families joined the other circus called sales. And so my dad taught us from a very early age to go sell things. I was selling corn off a hay wagon when I was 5 years old. He drops me off in a coal mine at 6:30 in the morning and says, go sell something. I come out at noon. Now I'm 16. My dad come out at noon. He's in the parking lot of this coal mine in Wheelwright, West Virginia. And he says, what'd you sell? I said, I didn't sell anything. He said, what are you doing out here? I said, everybody's at lunch. He says, well, where are you going? I said, we're going to lunch. He says, you ain't got any money for lunch. You didn't sell anything. And if you fast forward, you can guess what happened at dinner when I didn't sell anything. We weren't going for dinner. I had to go back in, slug back into, and I was carrying the old leather briefcase with about 40 pounds of tool steel and square steel stock, and came out around 8 o'clock, shift change, second shift is already going, third shift is coming on. And I said, there's only a skeleton crew. He says, well, where are you going? I said, we're going to the hotel. I'll try tomorrow. He says, you got no money to go to sleep. At 1:30 in the morning, I'm sitting across from this superintendent. There's 6 guys in this coal mine now running the tipple, the wash plant. And I said, all I want is somebody to buy something. And he said, what? I said, all I want is somebody to buy something. He says, what are you selling? I said, I'm selling 2.5-inch round TGP, turn ground and polished steel. He said, great, I'll take 12 inches. I said, outstanding. So I had an order. I ran back out to my dad and I said, I got your order. Let's go. He goes, oh, 12 inches? He goes, they come in 20-foot random lengths. Who's paying for the other 19 feet?
Oh, God. Oh, God.
So you can tell I lived it. It's visceral in my body at this moment. And we always have those moments. The challenge is that too many people, when they have the addiction doesn't happen that way. See, I didn't know I was addicted to being refused. I didn't know I was addicted to the approval of others. My dad just kept reminding me, push through it, push through it, push through it. Well, when you're on your own and when you're by yourself, some of these addictions, you can't push through yourself. The hit that happens in the brain, what I realized is that we get hits in the brain of dopamine that's more powerful than any morphine. So then that kind of started my journey into understanding personal development, which, by the way, I've revamped. Yes, one guy from Arkansas revamped the personal development industry. I don't know, but I now call it personal undevelopment. We have to get back to the foundational source where the crap started to happen. So.
Interesting. So getting back to what you said a little earlier about the sales circus, because there's a lot of guys that listen to this are entrepreneurs or salespeople, business owners, and they can, I'm sure, relate to the sales circus. I know I can't.
Well, you hear the Zig Ziglars and they sold pots and pans and they were the number one this. You hear the people all the time sold the Kirby vacuum. I just saw somebody that the guy, the vacuum store had the Kirby, the same Kirby he sold back in the 70s. So those of us who are entrepreneurial realize we want to control our own future. We want to control our own success. And what I'm loving what you're doing here is that addictions have a tendency to have us go skyrocket, high. And then we've got this because we're addicted to success. And then we also offset that by some of our addictions to success.
And
so,
one of the challenges that entrepreneurs and salespeople have that's a little different from the average person that has a job is that you spend a lot of time by yourself, especially if you're starting out in sales, hitting the pavement, or picking up the phone. You spend a lot of time by yourself, and it can be challenging for a lot of people.
Well, the challenge is that rejection we are predispositioned in our DNA to avoid rejection. And the reason that is because as a child, we have to have some kind of cognizance of something that could hurt us, right? The brain does two things. Will it kill me, or how fast can I recognize the pattern? So from a very early childhood, we're addicted to the approval of others. We bring mom that little weed. Remember when you brought mom the weed and she went, oh my God, it's the most beautiful flower. And she put it in a book and everything else. And you're like, and you open the book when mom's gone. You're like, oh my God, is that the flower I gave her? Why did she save that? Because we gave it to her. And the challenge is that that addiction never stops at childhood. It goes on into school where we go on and be the teacher's pet, especially if we think the teacher's like super hot, right? That we think the teacher's hot and sexy and like, oh my God, she liked me. She touched my shoulder. And this is guys. I can't speak for girls. But all of a sudden, we now want to make sure we get the golden star. And then we leave school and we go to college. And then we probably take a course or we take a degree that really wasn't ours. Our parents wanted us to take it. And then we go to work. And now we got to make the boss happy to get the raise. And we just constantly have this addiction for approval. And when we get off on our own, like you said, into the silence and into the quiet of our own selves, if we find something that all of a sudden gives us that dopamine hit, that gives us the chance to not be rejected, we want more of that. And that addiction can be alcohol, can be porn, can be a variety of things. So that's why I went back into the brain, because a lot of people are addicted to their old story and it's keeping them just absolutely broke.
Yeah, absolutely. When talking about the brain, I can't help but think there's an old song from, I don't know, maybe the 90s. It was.
Isn't that funny to say the 90s are an old song? I'm sorry. Flashback.
It goes something like insane in the membrane.
Yes.
Insane in the brain. Insane in the membrane. Insane in the brain.
Do you remember the cartoons that made that made it famous?
I don't.
I can. Yeah. Anyways, well, let's continue because
sure. But so anyway, the brain chemistry.
Yes.
The needing to feel good. So when I was in a sales position where I was literally, hitting the bricks, walking from business to business, and I would be like, after X amount of rejections, then I go back and, instead of prospecting, I was masturbating. And that really doesn't help business.
It doesn't. It's the Band-Aid that you had available to you to stop the pain. The challenge is with something like that later on, when you become cognizant of it and you man, I don't know why I do that. Here's the question. If anybody has ever said, I don't know why I do that, you have to really pay attention. You're not the same I that's asking the question that was actually doing the act. And that's where we get confused. We have these separate identities, but what happens is in the brain, we have these neural networks. And as a self-talk instructor, as somebody who teaches on the Self-Talk Institute, everything that you've said, anything you've ever done has been recorded in your brain. That which you repeat on a regular basis becomes permanent. And what happens is the new neural pathways of wanting to break this addiction, you're talking about a 7-lane highway versus a goat path of frequency, allowing electrons to run down. And the way that you change something is what's called through neural pruning. It's almost impossible to shut down a 7-lane highway with all of the stimuli that can happen. So that's another challenge of why it's so difficult, because the more it's done, the more it's repeated, the more it's laid down, the more it's easier. And the brain says, everything is this. And that's the way we get our recognition. We get our acceptance. So it's a challenge. It really is.
That highway in your brain, all those, we built this highway of sex and porn addiction, and so that is what that was my crutch that I leaned on. And you had said something really important. You said the things that we repeat to ourselves become permanent. And so I had wanted to crush this addiction. So I did what my doctor told me and said I had to go to 12-step meetings. And in the 12-step meetings, every single time I went, we'd say, hi. I'd say, hi, this is how you were supposed to introduce yourself. Hi, my name is Eric. I'm a sexaholic and I'm addicted to porn. And and I'm powerless over porn. And that is what I said for almost 2 decades. And guess what? I didn't get any shocker here. I didn't get much better. In fact, I actually got worse in the 12-step programs.
Well, Hippocrates found out that when somebody had a cold, he realized that I can't treat them the same way. That's why we have the 4 personality types, is because of medicine. And Hippocrates, when he said, I need to be able to figure out why this person doesn't get well, and he had to change the solution for each person, even though the diagnosis was the same. And so what happens is that's how we wound up with I don't know, all of the person. I know DISC, D-I-S-C, right? And then there's the go-getter, the red, the blue, the yellow, the green. And then maybe you're a whale or a dolphin or a guppy or a turtle. The thing is that there's 4 kinds of personalities. And the challenge is that every word has a result. And depending upon what their programming is, there's core beliefs that are inside of you. They're not personality traits, they're core beliefs. And that's different. And when you understand your core beliefs and you find out what those are, then you have to decide, you now have the foundation that you can go build something with. The Amen Institute realizes there's 16 brain types. There's 4 primary, and then there's the combination of them. And when you understand the brain type, a couple of things happen. One, sometimes there's a huge nutritional deficiency that can upgrade the hardware. Could you imagine your car running without oil? Most people don't have enough omegas in their brain, not in their body, in their brain, to allow them to make better decisions. So there's all of these little things that stack on top of each other. We used to own a machine shop, and there's something called stack tolerances. You put this one on top of this one on top of this one, and if those 3 things were each an inch, by the time you stack them, because of the irregularities, it's bigger than 3 inches. Well, you stack a porn addiction, and you stack a poor childhood, and you stack a bad relationship and a rejection from a sale, and all of a sudden it's more than just the 4 of those. And instantly we look for release. We look to alleviate our pain. We either do it for love or to avoid pain. And the things we do to avoid pain sometimes create more pain, but it's that addiction that we can easily fall into. I know this works temporarily, and that's why it's called an addiction.
Right. I really want to get into using nutrition to change your brain a little later, but you're talking about love and self-love, and you had told this story about Bob Proctor. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Bob Proctor is an expert on Think and Grow Rich, and actually worked with what's the mustache guy, the Napoleon Hill's buddy?
Carnegie? No, I know who you're talking about.
It's on the top
yes,
of my
his vice president of sales ran the insurance company.
Anyway, he has links to Think and Grow Rich. To Napoleon Hill. So Bob Proctor does.
Yep.
So that is huge, huge. And in the book Think and Grow Rich, chapter 11 has the mystery of sex transmutation.
Right.
It is a must read if you're listening to this podcast. But anyway, if you could tell the story about Bob Proctor and self-love.
So about 23 years ago, I hired Bob as a mentor, and my bride and I were going through his classes. And in 2004, our house was destroyed in Florida by the 3 hurricanes that crisscrossed right over Central Florida. And I called Bob and I said, Bob, I'm aggravated. I'm agitated. This is ridiculous. I can't do this. I'm trying to build my business out of my truck. And he says, how's your gratitude working? I said, what am I grateful for? I'm looking at my house. It's got a yellow sticker on it. It's condemned. I said, what am I supposed to do? He says, why don't you love yourself? I go, are you crazy? I said, what are you talking about? I said, we're professionals. We're the world-class leaders of our He says, I said, do you love yourself? And he goes, and he backs away from the phone because we weren't on Zoom. He backs away from the phone. He goes, love myself. What the hell are you doing? He says, I'm kissing myself. I kiss myself all the time. And he shifted my state. And I tell that story 2 or 3 times a week now. If we don't fall back in love with ourselves, it's always this outside thing that keeps us from becoming aware of the joy we're in right now. Sadhguru says, in this moment, choose misery or choose joy. And people who are addicted have masked misery because of the dopamine hit to be the thing of joy in their life. And it's really a chemical addiction to just a variety of things.
Yeah. The big challenge is with the self-love is usually, like when I would act out with pornography, afterwards, I would feel so much guilt and shame afterwards. I certainly didn't feel self-love.
Right.
So what would you say to the person that's listening right now that's really struggling and they're talking to the screen or talking to their phone right now going, what? Say I love myself? Are you crazy? Like, give me something practical. Like, what do you say to that person?
So understanding that the brain's looking for 2 things. Will this kill me, or how fast could I recognize the pattern? Right now, if you're listening to me, a new voice, you've probably listened to Eric a while, and he's a familiar voice. This is literally what happens in the brain, the vibrational state. You're okay with that. You know he's on your side. You know he's got the chutzpah. He's got the stripes that he's been there. My voice, on the other hand, isn't that. And it can become as literally as an attack. And that's the identity. We call it in the 4 archetypes that people use. That's the warrior that shows up. And the warrior that shows up is ready for the fight. And you have been fighting this dis-ease, as Bob Proctor would say, your body not at ease for minutes, days, decades. And it's not easy to let that down, to think this is simple to change. So here's some practical steps. This one's gonna send you to the edge. It's gonna push you to the edge. Start to write down 10 things you love about you. I have my students write out 500 things they've done well. The challenge is when you're an addict, you're thinking that the things you've done well need to be Pulitzer Prize quality to offset the pain and suffering you've been in. And the reality is it does not. I'm telling you, the challenge is that you don't have enough evidence of how amazing you are. Because the most recent evidence we use is the one where we, as Eric said, we feel guilt, we feel shame, we feel less than. So while you're not in one of those tender states, write down things that you've done well. And I'm serious about anything. Did you graduate 2nd grade? Right? Did you learn how to drive a car? Have you ever been on a plane? See, we don't think those are, well, that's nothing. Everybody's done. No, it was your first time at some time. Your porn started the first time at some time. And if we can go back to the moments, it's literally a math problem, Eric. If we have enough moments to where we can get out of our ears and into our own eyes and see our evidence that we're a good person, that we've done well, if you've ever hit a sales target, if you've ever raised a child, if you've ever, got a passport. Any of these things qualify for things that you've done well.
Yeah.
We need evidence. This is evidence-based. You have the evidence of the addiction. You have the evidence of the guilt. You have the evidence of the files on your computer, whatever it is. We need to go to battle and find the evidence of all of the things that make you an amazing soul.
I completely agree with you. And Anthony Robbins calls what you just described stacking. He says that getting rid of guilt and shame is really challenging. That's the bottom of the rung on the emotional ladder. And he says, instead of trying to like get rid of it, is to stack all those successes up and write them down, like you said. So that's awesome. I love that you said that.
And for those listening, if they draw a little box real quick on their paper, and in the top left of the box, they put potential. What's the potential you have to overcome the addiction? What's the potential? Not saying you can do it in a second, but what's the potential? It's 100%. It's possible. Then there's the actions. So top left, potential. Top right, actions. What are the actions you can take? See, the actions determine our results. So bottom right-hand corner, under actions, you can put results. And then our results determine what? Our beliefs. And that's where this potential is taken away from us because of these past beliefs. And when we have limiting beliefs, we have limiting potential, which limits our actions, which limits our results, and then the vicious cycle starts. If you start with the writing down the things that you've done well, the stacking start to stack in your favor, here's what's going to happen. That little voice in your head, that little addiction to approval is going to, as soon as you start and write down going, I graduated first grade. This is stupid. You're already saying it, and then you go, I learned to ride a bike. How freaking, this guy's an idiot. I am not an idiot. That's your old story, looking for validation to not change your identity.
And change your identity. So that's my story. I had went to countless 12-step meetings and said that I was powerless over the addiction, that I was a sexaholic. And finally one day I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. This is not working. And I found this little app that uses to help break addictions. And just on a whim, I was creating my login and password. And I thought, I'm going to put my login as Powerful Eric. And in that moment, pitiful, powerless, porn addicted Eric died, and Powerful Eric was born. Identity change is huge.
Well, and this is why I've done trainings on limiting identities. And literally, those identities can rip the fabric of time and space and make you see things that aren't there, make you do things that, how many of you have ever been in an argument with somebody, and at the end of it, when it was all said and done, somebody says, I can't believe you said that. What did I say? You said this. There's no way I said that. Oh, hell yeah, I have it. I got it on video. I was waiting for you to throw fists. And what happens is that we don't realize who we are. We wind up going back into our default mode. There's something in the brain called the default mode network that when we're not activated by our environment, we wind up in our default mode. This is how you can drive home for 2 hours or 45 minutes in traffic and go, how did I get home? I don't even remember getting home. This is how you can spend 2 or 3 hours addicted to porn, watching porn, doing that, and you don't even realize the time is gone because it's your default mode network. There's ways around that, and it's activating the prefrontal cortex, activating the thinking mind again, and we can talk more about that on the second part.
Yeah, and I would love to hear more about that. And like I said, using nutrition to actually physically change your brain, all these things are just so important. I was just before I got on this podcast with you, I was talking to a friend of mine, and she, as coincidence would have it, is just now taking recently some brain supplements, and she said that they've been really helpful. And by the way, I'm not selling brain supplements here, but I'm just saying that she found it really helpful.
Yeah, there's certain things, GABA, omega-3s in the right percentages, DEA, DH. It's a hydration. 5% reduction in hydration, which most people are almost chronically dehydrated. But a 5% reduction in short-term memory and a 5% reduction in hydration is a 2% loss of short-term memory. So if you want to get 2% smarter like quick, get your right amount of fluid flow into your body.
Right. Well, Sean, I appreciate you being with us today. We're going to have Sean back for the next podcast as well. So, Sean, any final words for us today before we meet next?
Jim Rohn said you can't go back and make a brand new start. You can start and create a brand new ending. And it's not that you need to do more, it's you need to do less. And when that sinks in, you'll realize you have all of the capability and capacity in you right now.
Awesome. Love it. All right. So please join us next week. Sean will share more of the how-tos and the positive side of things of the brain, changing the brain. And so we will see you next week. All right. So that's part A.
Yep.
All right. So let's take a little break here. All right, let's see here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just cue the music here. And then we can start in on the how-tos and the positive stuff.
Take control of your life. Break the chains and rise. No more feeling powerless. No more shame. Take your power. Break out of the pain. Because it's more than fornication. More than procreation. It's not just self-stimulation. Sex energy is for creation and transformation into a new destination. Porn Talk, yeah. Change your heart from dark to light. Porn Talk, yeah. Break free, take back your power and rise. I said take back your power.
This is Porn Talk. This is Porn Talk Live. Here is your host, Eric Zuzak.
Welcome back to Porn Talk. This is Powerful Eric. I'm with our guest, Sean Murphy. Welcome back, Sean. We are continuing our conversation from last week. If you weren't with us, go back and listen to that. But Sean is a licensed brain trainer. He's a Nero-Encoding Specialist. What is that? We'll find out. And he talks about how to actually change the hardware, not just the software of your brain, but the hardware. So welcome back, Sean.
It's good to be here, Eric. I'm excited. I really enjoyed our conversation last week, and I would encourage people. It's one of those things to go back. Well, I'll just listen to this one. You're going to miss out on some big secrets if you do that. So just throwing that out there.
So we had talked about some of the challenges with addiction, but what things can we do? What are some practical steps that we can do if the person that's listening to this right now, this person is really deep into their addiction. It's porn, sex, or drugs, alcohol. What are some they're working on the software part of their brain now by listening to the podcast, but changing the hardware is, frankly, kind of a new thing as far for me,
right,
on changing the hardware. So how do we do that?
So one of the things in changing the hardware is actually giving your subconscious permission. There's something called SVT, subconscious visualization technique. And when you do that, the challenge is most people, when they want to go into meditation, some of you have been told to meditate. Some of you have been told, close your eyes and picture a wonderful scene. The challenge with that is that we have the voices of these other identities that scream us. So here, let me give you an example. If you do want to have a little experiment and you're in a safe place right now, you can close your eyes and imagine a stage. Some of you are afraid of public speaking. I get it. This is just all of the voices in your head. I'd ask you right now, who's listening to this podcast, who's listened to the previous episodes of this podcast for weeks and weeks and weeks and years, and who now is listening to it now? If you had to name that identity, who's on stage? See, because when we have these issues of I'm just so mad I did that, the I that is mad is not the same I that did that. So part of rewiring the brain, the hardware, upgrading the hardware, is realizing that you can literally pull out this dream machine and plug in the new hardware, just like you would upgrade the engine of a car. So what happens is now I want you to be the I, the one that wants to be healthier, the one that wants to be more creative, the one that wants to be less addicted to the addiction. I want that one to stand on stage. And literally what you're going to feel is you're going to feel something someplace in your body. Most of the times it's in the lungs, because that's where people carry grief. How is me thinking I'm on stage doing that? Because it's the grief of the addiction. We're literally rewiring the brain and upgrading the hardware. If you've ever seen somebody who's had part of their brain, a lobotomy, and yet the brain still works. There's people who have had half of their hemisphere, the half of the hemisphere gone, and their body still operates. So the hardware upgrades itself. Why? Because it's a need. My question to you is there a need for you to get healthy? Is there a need for you to be able to lay that addiction down, not forget it and shadow it and stick it in a corner? Here's another thing that will literally change the hardware of your brain right now. If you're drawing the line in the sand.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Just to be clear on the first step here, you're talking about to use visualization to change your brain.
Yes, you can literally upgrade the hardware of your brain. If I put you into a hypnotic trance, you can literally, they've been able to pierce the skin of the hand with a needle and make the left hole bleed and the right hole not bleed. That's how much power you have over your body. So the visualization is to have this experience that the I that is in pain, the I that is suffering, not the I that is the addictor or the addicted. It's the one who's the one that's suffering when you're done with it, who experiences the shame and guilt. You'll literally find that sometimes it's a child, sometimes it's a younger version of you, sometimes it's literally a beaten up version of you that's embarrassed. When you start to feed that I, the I of you that experiences the suffering, and say it's okay, that's much different than feeling shame and guilt. See, the difference between shame and guilt, and this happens in the brain, is shame, I'm the problem. Guilt is it's the problem. I have a solution. Shame, I'm the problem. And so if I'm shaming myself, what if all of a sudden you stop just for a moment and stop shaming yourself and said, we can do this. The you and the I that felt the shame, you didn't do it. You're just absorbing that pain. So visualization is one to upgrade the hardware, literally rewire it. They have fMRIs, functional magnetic resonance imaging machines, that show people when they go through this process, it's literally creating a new neural pathway, which is upgrading the hardware. So that's number one. Number two is nutrition. Most of us are wildly deficient in certain chemicals, right? They found that one of the things, if you're over 50, I don't know how many of your people might be over 50 in your audience, but if you're over 50, your brain doesn't use glucose as well anymore. And that's the whole thing, that your diet is glucose, carbs. So getting your body into ketosis, when you starve the carbs, your body creates the ketones. They're already produced in your body. The challenge is it never has a chance to run on this jet fuel, and the body needs ketones. So they've showed that MCI, mild cognitive impairment, addiction, and a variety of things, when the brain is on ketones, it changes and makes better decisions. Hydration is another thing to upgrade.
That is awesome. because I'm a big advocate of intermittent fasting and
Yes.
traditional fasting. And it's something I'm starting to introduce to my clients, is to use at least intermittent fasting.
Now, so here's the addiction challenge with the language that they've given us, because you're doing it, it's performing. What if you just said intermittent eating? At least now, this is so everything that happens, we live in a binary state. And one of the greatest ways to improve the hardware is to pay attention to the language that limits our capability and capacity. Intermittent fasting, most people, I have to give up. No, intermittent eating, if you change that, all of a sudden your body says, I'll eat when I'm hungry. And I can do 16-8, 16 off, 8 hours of eating, and I'd be okay. And it's amazing how, if I know I'm just going to eat then, but if I fast, I get to suffer again. So
Yeah.
it's simply a change of language. And that's when I became this self-talk master, if you will. It's the slightest little intention behind every single word that changes our results.
I totally am on board. Totally agree. I mean, the whole
If you didn't, I wouldn't be here.
the whole powerful Eric thing rather
Yep.
than powerless Eric. Yeah. So you're and then the eating, when you're not, if you don't eat long enough, then you will go into ketosis, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Usually it takes anywhere from 72 hours to longer. But what happens is the metabolic shift that happens when you do the intermittent eating is that it literally starts to recenter the body, and you have a bigger hit of dopamine. You have a bigger hit of, when you talk to people and I'm on my 3rd day of a water fast and I've never felt better. On the day 7 of the water fast, I've never, oh my gosh, I have such clarity. The challenge is that all of the vibrational state of the body that has to digest the food, right? Our stomach is our second brain. Otherwise, we'd have the head of a small balloon. And the reason that we have the neurons in our gut, why we get our gut instinct, is that if we don't give our gut a chance to relax, the brain can't process all of the pain and the suffering. And that's why sometimes we eat. How many do we know that are food addicts? Because we don't want to have the thoughts we're thinking.
Ice cream is my thing. Oh, ice cream.
What flavor?
Chocolate, dark chocolate. Oh.
Now, you know why the dark chocolate is a huge hit of dopamine.
You're telling me.
Yeah. Thanks, Captain Obvious. Captain Obvious to the lobby. Captain Obvious to the lobby.
But no, really, I love that you brought up intermittent eating. It's taken a while for me to digest that.
So here's the thing. So let me go to there's a thing called hedonics, and hedonics is our need to justify our joy. It's our responsibility to joy. So we have habitual actions, and then we have these hedonic actions, right? Think about it. Hedonism. So when we understand, and what marketers do, they market to the hedonic responsibility for you to experience joy, such that it is such an ingrained response that it's a no-brainer. How many times have we had no-brainers, right? It's a no-brainer to go back to the thing that gives me pleasure. Well, when we start to activate our brain, and when you do put it on intermittent eating, and you allow the body, if you can, to start to put ketones into your body, and all of a sudden there's clarity, brain fog goes away, clarity comes up, sleep is better, digestion is better, and all of a sudden you're just better. There's a huge thing that changes, and all of a sudden we don't know what to do with the extra time we have.
Yeah. And I can verify everything you're talking about, because I started with intermittent eating and then went to traditional not eating. So I went 11 days without eating, and I felt fantastic. I felt great. And I actually would have went longer, but we had a social thing coming up, and I wanted to enjoy everybody and everything. So I chose to break my not eating. And so it is a total and complete lie that, oh, if you don't eat for a couple days, you'll die or whatever. I felt fantastic. I felt great. Now, the first couple days were definitely challenging for sure. And there was some time along the way that was challenging, but all in all, I felt really great.
And it's the identity that's the challenge. Your body wasn't hungry. You proved it. You went to day 11. Your body wasn't upset. It went to day 11. It was the mind. Joe Dispenza says this. He says, everything that we've done is recorded in our brain. Our mind is the archive of everything we've ever done. And when somebody says, have you lost your mind? What they're literally saying is I can't find your pattern that I know you for. So have you lost your pattern? And I want somebody to say to you when they ask you, have you lost your mind? You say, oh, heck yeah, I lost my mind. Are you kidding me? It's the greatest thing I've ever done.
Yeah, because that mind was crazy. I'm so glad I lost my mind.
It was an addict. Oh my God.
Yeah, I love Joe Dispenza. If you're listening to this podcast, he's right up. I mean, he goes right into the whole identity change. And by the way, I just want to share this. I learned this the other day. Talking about Anthony Robbins, he said the number one tool, he's taught millions. He said the number one tool to affect change in your life is your identity.
And he talks about the 6 human needs, not Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the 6 human needs: certainty, uncertainty, significance, and love and connection before we get to contribution and growth. Everybody wants contribution and growth, but they're not willing to hit the first 4. And where most people are in the first 4, the pain for life is when they're in significance and in certainty. When I need certainty and I need significance, those two are never the bedfellows. They're the bedfellows of pain. So until you can deal with the uncertainty of not being able to do the addiction, that's uncertain. I have no idea what to do. I need to eat carrots, right? And all of a sudden you take on another addiction. The challenge is certainty, uncertainty, love, and connection, which is a tough one when we're addicts because everybody's got a preconceived notion. The anterior cingulate cortex is that radio receiver, and you show up going, I wonder if they know, and they don't know, but all of a sudden they seem to know, and all of a sudden the conversation just goes south. So how do you deal with that? Tony Osel talks about the triangle: physiology, focus, language, and meaning. And so how do you move? So you can't move your brain, but Joe Dispenza says the way the brain moves is the way the brain grooves. The brain guy, who also is that Jim Quick, right, talks about it. The way the brain grooves is the way the brain moves. So how do you move? Physical exercise. I'm not saying go join a gym. I'm saying walk for 5 minutes every half hour if you can. You will literally change. You'll see how fast the whole brain will rewire itself into saying, hey, this thing that's carrying us around loves us. So those are.
Is this number 3?
I've got a place to, when you're ready, let me know, for people to go find out what type brain they have.
Yes, let's save that to the end.
Yep. Teaser, can't go anywhere. We got you. You got to stay now.
So was that number 3, exercise to change your brain?
Exercise. Yep. So yeah, visualization, nutrition, exercise, and literally adding to that list of 500 we talked about in the first episode. Write down things you've done well. You need some documented evidence, because you have all of the evidence. I don't even need you to write it down, of all of the shame and the guilt. Your body literally needs to see the evidence that you're not guilty, that you are a good person, that you've done good things, that you've made an impact in this life, right? Never be too cautious of the hole that your life not being here will leave. It will leave a big hole. And so we need you some evidence to show how amazing you are.
We do need you. If you're listening to this podcast, I have a lot of guys reach out to me, and for a while there, it seemed like every other guy that was contacting me was saying, oh, I had tried to commit suicide, or I'm thinking of committing suicide. And so if you are, call for help to a suicide prevention hotline. Please don't call me. Call a suicide prevention hotline. But what would you say to that person that is maybe they're listening now and they're contemplating that? What would you say to that person?
I would say, first of all, tell me what date it is. Secondly, because right now your amygdala is fired up, your hippocampus is on fire, and it says literally, we've been thinking about this for way too long, and I can't do it anymore. Your hippocampus, your wingman. So I would literally say, what time is it? How many things are red in your room right now? How many things are green in your room? And if you're serious about listening, listen to this right now, because what's happening now is we're starting to activate the prefrontal cortex, and your amygdala is starting to fight back. It's saying, no, we're in a serious situation. You're not. What temperature is it in the room? See, when you start to activate the prefrontal cortex in somebody's brain, literally the amygdala says, okay, so we're not in a fight or flight or freeze situation. The challenge is that most people can't unlock any of this because we never talk about the fourth ear, the fourth F, the freedom. Fight, flight, freeze, or freedom. You're going to go through all of that because you can wire yourself back in. What size shoe do you wear? How big are your pants? These things, those are a stupid question. It's a question your brain has to answer because your brain looks for two things. Will it kill me, or how fast can I figure out the pattern? So I would say to somebody who's struggling right now, take a breath. Just feel your lungs fill up. What color would be a healing color for you right now? And in that healing color, let that start to flow in. And all of that doubt and fear and negative, give it a color. Some people pick some odd colors for that. And when you exhale, feel that exhale going out. And now feel your body lighten just a little bit. And in that lightening, you can now begin to realize it's okay to ask for help.
I feel light blue coming in and black going out.
And imagine, and so here's where the shame and guilt comes in. Well, if I breathe that black out, it's going to hurt somebody else. As soon as it leaves your body, the universe has an agreement with you. Anytime you give over your pain to it turns it into rainbows, butterflies, and unicorns. I promise you. So exhale that dark. Let it fly out of you. Let it leave you. And let more of that blue, let more of your healing color come in, because the more that you let come in, you literally start to feel your body vibrate. Maybe for some of you who are listening to this, it's the first time you've had the goosebumps, the chicken skin in a long time, because this is the higher self of you that's becoming aligned with who you truly are. Not the one who is the shame, not the one who is the guilt. This is the one who said, I do love me.
I do love me. And if you are unable to say that, you can say, I like myself. If you're unable to say that, I'm learning to like myself. I'm learning to like myself, or I'm learning to love myself. And if you want to do the Bob Proctor thing, you could do that too. All right. So we talked about exercise to change the brain.
Mhm.
We talked about in the very beginning, we talked about using intermittent eating to change the brain. It takes a while for me to
visualization. Yep.
And then the first thing was the visualization. So using nutrition to change the brain, is there a particular, I don't want to say
the Amen Institute has some great ones. And when I give you the link for figuring out what type of brain you are, I'll offer you the opportunity to reach out to me. You'll get the contact information here for those of you listening.
Yeah, well, why don't we do that right now? So
okay.
It's Dr. Amen, like
yes,
like AMEN.
AMEN, yep, just like amen, brother. Pass the plate.
So and what is this test?
So it's called mybrainfitlife.com, mybrainfitlife.com. And you'll see it'll say Brain Fit Life, and you'll see getting started now. Take the free assessment. It's $99 for the year or something. Don't do that. Don't do that. Just take the free assessment. It'll take you about 20 minutes. And the reason that is because it'll determine, based upon Dr. Amen's tens of thousands of PET scans and brain scans, They understand a certain basic questioning that allows you to find out which brain you are. And then you'll find out there's some deficiencies. Some people are taking caffeine and that's not good for them. Some people need GABA and they're not taking GABA. Some people, 98% of the people who go to the Amen Institute when he did the test are wildly deficient in omegas. And some people will go, well, I'll just go to Walmart and get it. No, because you got to have a certain DEA and DEH combination of them in order for them to perform. Otherwise, you're putting water in your fuel tank and you're thinking, man, this is not doing anything. Why? Because it's not doing anything. So go there and they'll give you a list of information. And if you'd like to have a conversation with me about that, to help understand it a little bit more and help you possibly rewire some of the old stories in your mind and in your brain and in your past, reach out to me, SeanGMurphy.com. You can find me on Instagram, Sean G. Murphy Now. When do you want to talk to me? Now, Sean G. Murphy Now. And yeah, we'll have a conversation.
Between the Sean and the Murphy is the letter G, right?
G
like
is in George. Yep.
George. Sean
G.
Murphy.com. And so who would be your perfect client?
My perfect client is somebody that's had success and kind of fallen off a little bit. Somebody who is decided that they're done with being not enough. Now, it doesn't sound like everybody. There's a lot of people who are still addicted to their addiction. I asked 3 questions. If you answer yes to all of these, you're in the funnel of a good client of mine. And the first question is do I have your permission to help? So your subconscious just answered that. You need to pay attention to how it answered. If the answer is no, don't call me. I'm not God. I don't walk on water and I can't fix that. Second question is if he answered yes, do I have your permission to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable? Because this isn't about having more of the love and joy and kumbaya. You want to get some stuff done. You want to move forward. You're going to feel uncomfortable because the thing you want, you don't have, and it's going to make you feel uncomfortable. You're going to think a way you've never thought, feel a way you've never felt, and do things you've never done. That's a freaking recipe for disaster. So do I have your permission to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable? And if you say yes to that, you're going to love question 3 is, do I have your permission to take you out of that uncomfortable feeling? Because I promise I won't leave you there no matter how long it takes. So that's my ideal client.
Awesome. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. But Sean, there's somebody listening right now that is still just really struggling. They don't feel good about themselves. Maybe they're an entrepreneur or salesperson. Their sales are low. Business is not booming. They're deep in their addiction. What's one last word of wisdom you could leave them with?
So recognize where you're at, right? Imagine GPS. If you wanted to get out of this pain, the suffering, the low, you can't just plug in the destination to where you want. There has to be some movement for the GPS to locate you. And the way GPS locates you is realize, I am here. Just put it down on paper. You can write, I am here. And then you've got to ask. See, Einstein said the challenges that are made with the mind of man can't be the same mindset that gets you out of here. They can't be solved with the same mindset that created them. So then you ask a QLQ. Who do I become when I'm not here? Literally, write that down. Because the kinesiology of writing slows down the brain enough to be able to begin the response that it needs, because it doesn't have an answer to that, because you keep saying, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. If you use what in psychology we call a QLQ, a quantum linguistic question, who do I become when I'm not here? You start to open up the opportunity of your mind. You start to be able to stack some things from the future to be able to bring them into the places that aren't here. I get to become a better dad. I get to say, I'm sorry to certain people. I get to say thank you to certain people. There are people right now who are in your world that have served you and helped you. Maybe you haven't said thank you to them. Send them a text right now. You want to change your vibrational state? Send messages out saying, hey, listen, thanks for being my friend. I know it seems odd. I know it seems weird. Yet if you don't want to be here, do that. You can do that right now. Send a text out to somebody saying, hey, listen, thank you. And they'll be excited and they'll reach back, and all of a sudden you'll find out that when you send that message, they'll say, you know what? I needed that. And all of a sudden you are now on the other side of the fence to where people need you. I can tell you right now, I need you in my world. If you're in this vibrational state of powerful Eric's message, I need you in my world. Send me a message. Thanks, Eric.
Love it. The opposite of addiction is connection. So reach out, reach out. All right. Well, Sean, thanks again for being with us. Please check out Sean's material at seangmurphy.com. And I'm going to close with the Ziegler quote that says, you are what you are and where you are from what has gone into your mind. But you can change what you are and you can change where you are by changing what goes into this beautiful, magnificent mind.
Thanks for listening. If you're struggling with porn or sex addiction, reach out to Eric at powerfuleric.com.